Oh, oh. So today, Marie, at work, we had a we had a day. We had a day where, because it's the opening day for
Taco Thursday.
No, I wish it was like hot. Well, it was Hot Dog Thursday.
Sweet.
It was the Twins opening game today, and our office is right near the Twin Stadium, and so, we were allowed to like eat hot dogs and chips and watch part of the game from the office today.
Not too shabby.
Yeah, pretty sweet. Pretty good way to end the day. Really, my like model was running for hours. I started a calculation in the morning on my computer. I hit run, and it's still probably going. It might end when I come in tomorrow.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
It's like, why don't I get hot dog?
Feed me the head of a cat. Like in a, want to feed me a kitten or whatever the hell it is. Anyways, we're getting dark.
Oh, man.
Hello, listeners of the Mad Scientist Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Cogswell, here with my co-host.
I'm Marie Mayhew.
Oh,
What?
yeah, she is Marie Mayhew. So we actually
Chris Cogswell.
it's so cool over here. We have some exciting stuff that we decided on 20 minutes ago. We are officially announcing the beginning of our production company, Damn It Chippy Productions. So
Loving it.
Yeah, so actually,
again, the same thought and consideration that goes into every single major life decision.
Every single one.
20 minutes. Boom.
Every single
Here's
one.
what we're going to do. Boom.
So actually, if you have an idea for a podcast, or you want to start producing one or something, email us, please. The Mad Scientist Podcast at gmail.com.
Yeah.
We are open for business.
We are. And we're excited because we want diversity. We want people that are out there thinking to themselves, my voice is it's not being heard. I'm not being heard. Nobody cares. We care.
Yeah.
Or we can pretend to.
Hell yeah. No, we do care. We legitimately
do
care.
care.
If you're a listener to this show and you want to start a podcast, please let us know, because we would love to help you.
Yes.
Anyways, this episode. So we have a couple another quick housekeeping stuff to do quick. We are also at the end of this episode gonna say the names of our patrons, our new patrons, and all the people that give us new reviews. Thank you so much.
Woo!
We are edging close to that 100 review mark, Marie.
We love that. Review us.
We really are. It's pretty amazing. It's pretty damn great. So
we crave feedback.
We do crave feedback desperately.
We need attention. Sorry. That's what it sounds like. It always feels so weird. Like, the part I never get used to about this is like telling people like, hey, come and tell us what you think, but please be nice.
I know, seriously. We're at 89 reviews right now.
Sorry, yes. Exciting.
89 reviews in the United States. We actually have reviews in Australia and in Canada too, which is really cool. So it's pretty exciting.
Oh my God.
Yeah. We you can actually see iTunes from different countries. I didn't know that. Anyways,
Australia?
Yeah.
Oh my God. You brave motherfuckers out there in Australia, man.
I'm telling you.
Shout out.
We are killing it.
Shout out to everything that's trying to kill them in Australia. Oh.
Anyways, this week's episode, we are talking about trees, and specifically, do trees communicate with one another? Now, this episode actually started thanks to a dear fan and friend of the show, and he's just a great guy. He's been supporting us from the very beginning, Robert. So thank you very much, Robert, for all your support, and thanks for sending me the book. That was awesome of you. And we're super excited. Yeah, I'm so excited to finally be doing this episode on this stuff. So anyways, do trees communicate with one another? So it's going to be a good episode. So let's get into it.
Yes.
Welcome to the Mad Scientist Podcast. This week's episode, tree communication.
All right, dear listeners. So before we start this episode this week, we wanted to give a shout out and play a promo for a show that we really enjoy, which is the Oh No Lit Class podcast. This show, all of the books that I didn't read in school, they review and talk about on the show. It is super funny. The hosts are great folks. They are friends of the show for sure. And we seriously suggest you check out their show. It is a lot of fun. And yeah, so go check out Oh No Lit Class, and here is their promo.
I'm Megan.
I'm RJ.
And we host Oh No Lit Class, a comedy literature podcast that tells you all the strange and sexy facts you never knew about the books you had to read in school.
Every episode is a fun, foul-mouthed spark notes for your ears, filled with author bios, plot summaries, bad impressions, and Megan singing.
It's mostly you that sings.
No, I sing well, she sings poorly.
That's not true. So come listen to us ruin classic literature one book at a time at ohnolitclass.com or wherever you get your podcasts.
Oh No Lit Class. We're for kids.
No, we're not.
And we're back. So, Chris, I will say, can I say, I know, thank you, Rob, for sending us this. I will say that this is the first of our many episodes together, but I'm a little like, can trees talk to one another? Sure they can. That sounds good.
It's okay. It is a super interesting concept because it brings into question like all of the things that we talk about on the show about, for instance, so we talk about like, could aliens talk to us? Right. Mm-hmm. And we talk about all these other concepts like this, and really all this comes together, there are alien species in some way on our own planet, right? And there are things that are very, very different than us in sensory, information that they take in, and in all walks of different types of life, right? Mm-hmm. And so
not just Charlene and accounts payable.
No, not just Charlene and accounts payable, like all kinds of different stuff, right? So, for instance, I mean,
got a good one about her. But yes, keep going.
Take that, Charlene. So, so it's an interesting concept. This idea of say, do plants talk to each other? Well, first off, what does it mean to talk? What does it mean to communicate with each other? Right. And by looking at how plants communicate, maybe we can learn something about the way that we communicate as a species, or even how we evolved to communicate. Right. So that's kind of the concept here for that. Now, in terms of, let's say, plant communication overall, first off, Marie, when I say communication, what do you... when I say communication... It's okay.
Yes. I'm serious.
It's okay. You're serious.
I'm serious. Serious. I'm down. I'm totally serious. I'm totally serious.
When I say that... When you think of communication, what do you think of immediately?
Well, I think about talking.
Think about talking, right?
That's verbal, yeah. Verbal cues in a language.
Yeah, so right? sounds and gestures, even, like, that's the thing. Communication can mean all kinds of things. If you couldn't see, it might be very difficult for you to understand what someone's saying, actually, right? Or pick out even in the world the voices of someone talking to you, right? If someone says excuse me to you, but you can't see them, how do you know that they're saying excuse me to you and not to someone next to you or someone around you, right? Like, the directionality of language is actually a much bigger component to it than we think of, right?
Yes.
And then on top of that, too, there are other parts of language that we sometimes get in trouble for not knowing. So, for instance, when I'm at a movie theater and evidently am breathing very loudly, my wife will stare at me until I stop, but I don't realize how loudly I'm breathing. I'm a fat guy. Like, I breathe heavy. It's what happens. You know what I mean? It's whatever. It's part of life, okay? But I won't realize how much noise I'm making until my wife will finally have to punch me and be like, shut up. Because I'm like, this movie's really good. Right? Like, fucking super gross. But seriously, I mean, there are verbal cues and things that people sometimes, pick up, and it ends up being actually very, it can be detrimental for those that can't pick up those cues, right? And we see that in Asperger's disorder, right? Where social cues aren't picked up, and so people will, it just get into snafus. Translate. Yeah.
Yeah, they can't translate. But also the thing with communication is, I think if you are communicating, you are sentient. You have either a sense of self, right? That you exist and you are a thinking entity and you are communicating outwards to something with the intention of being heard and responded back to, right? So I think that that's a huge part of sort of my dilemma with the whole tree thing, is that if they're communicating, then to me that also means that they have some sort of what's the word I'm looking for? They're alive.
They have
Not just in the alive sense,
that-
but that they're that they're sentient beings.
Yeah. So what you're actually getting to, Marie, is the thing that I was hoping to trick you with at the end of this episode, but you're too sharp for me. Yeah.
Boom.
Actually, this idea of plant communication has led to a new theory in philosophy, known as basically known as plant rights.
Oh dear God.
As plant what's the word? Plant rights, and the specifically what they look at is the moral standing of plants and their use in agriculture and stuff, right? And plant autonomy.
Mhm.
And so what does it mean to basically bioethics diverging into this area of plants? Because really, like you said, as we start to get off on this list, plants are going to check off a lot of the boxes that we usually think of as being what makes something sentient or what makes something conscious. Not conscious necessarily, but what makes something deserving of rights. I mean, and actually that's a great place to start, maybe even, is what would you consider to be, what would be your list, say top 5 things that give things rights?
They are thinking, self-governing, autonomous beings that have that can communicate. That's even, I mean, communicating more is just almost more of an output, but like, that's a good question. I would say that they are autonomous, self-governing beings that are able to present themselves like, it's not like, I don't know. That's really very eloquently put. But I think it's almost easier to say what doesn't, what I think doesn't deserve rights. And this is probably a rabbit hole, but are things that, but I feel like, okay, well, things that don't have feelings or that don't have, that aren't living, like a rock.
Okay. So rocks and things aren't
fucking
aren't
eloquent.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
So fucking eloquent. I'm so fucking good at this.
So there is actually a big field of philosophy that deals with this kind of idea, obviously, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so this idea is called the grounds of moral status. Okay, in some ways.
Mm-hmm.
And so moral status is sort of this idea of I guess, what does something have a need to be thought of as being moral, or as being as being sort of part of our moral worldview, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so we think about the idea of like rights, and so what gives something a right, right? And so there's different views of that, but generally there's these senses of like so there's this idea in philosophy where so Peter Singer has this idea about kind of, what basically gives someone the right to have an abortion is kind of where he looks at things, right?
Mm-hmm.
But really,
okay.
But really though, some of his ideas though end up being this sense of, say, this sense of sort of, okay, well, if a thing is, like you said, conscious, so if it seems to communicate with each other, does it seem to feel pain? Does it seem to be able to have some autonomy? So can it reproduce on its own? These kinds of things go into the argument of well, this means that we have some moral responsibility to this being to not alter any of those things. So the argument would be, if plants can communicate, then we should not have the right to stop that communication for no reason.
Right.
Right.
Or to impose our will on them.
Right.
We cannot make a decision for them. They are self-deciding. They have autonomy over their own lives and their own experience. We can't boss them around.
Yeah.
Basically.
Yeah, in some ways, right? And so
we're not the boss of the trees.
No, yeah. Yeah. And so this idea is that that plants basically should be included in kind of things that we feel we have a moral responsibility to. So even if we don't think that even if we don't think that plants are sentient or can communicate or whatever, the very fact of them having some kind of autonomy and lifestyle of some sort means that we should not harm them unduly.
Yeah. So but then, okay. So then what do you build homes out of? What do you what do you eat?
Well, but that's the thing though, is that that's where bioethics gets tricky, because it comes into this whole idea of, say, well, we can use plants, but we shouldn't abuse them, is kind of, I guess, the way that it would be viewed. Just like we view animals with eating, right? I mean, Peter Singer would say we should be vegetarian, but Peter Singer's kind of, he's kind of extreme, I think, for a lot of people's viewpoints, right? But the idea would be that, okay, well, you can still utilize plants in a way that allows you to make use of them, or even healthily help them grow, that is still beneficial to humans, but not unnecessarily cruel or unusual, maybe is the word, right?
Well, yeah.
But again,
what is unnecessary or cruel?
Yeah.
If you have no idea if it's what you're doing to it,
yeah,
is grafting. So for grafting apple trees or something like that, is that unnecessarily cruel?
Well, I don't. Yeah, that's the problem with all of this, right? Is that you end up getting into these. You end up getting into these much more complicated. These much more complicated moral questions. I mean, even forget just grafting. I mean, what about clipping flowers, right? I mean, imagine you clipped the head off of animals and stuck them in a vase, right? Like, if we're gonna start equating, and then the idea is too.
That's just ghoulish.
The idea becomes too, like, okay, well, is a worm equivalent to a tulip? Because they kind of have the same communicative ability. They sort of, right? Like these questions start getting very muddy. And so it's a problem. But anyways, it's an interesting philosophical field, but it all stems though from this idea that we've started to gain more and more over time, which is that plants can communicate with each other in some ways. Now, the bulk of the research, it's okay. The bulk of this,
I'm coming along.
We're doing great. The bulk of the information for this episode comes from a book called. This book is called "The Secret Life of Trees," and it's all about this botanist sort of, or I guess he's not really the hidden life of trees. Sorry, maybe not
what they feel, how they communicate.
Yeah. And so it's actually a really great book. I highly suggest it. The audiobook wasn't super great. Just because I think like the narration I thought was a little bit slow for me. But anyways, the book is by Peter Wohlleben, and he's a German forester who currently is basically taking care of this large wood in Germany. And so anyways, the forest that he manages specifically is a beech forest. And so this beech trees are extremely interesting. They have all kinds of interesting properties. So for instance, they actually they communicate with each other through basically sending out shoots from their roots. So they grow in these very, very large colonies, basically. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And so as they grow out, then they kind of have this larger, they kind of have fungus that grows on them and stuff, and they're able to communicate through their roots and through the fungus, and then also in other ways too. So for instance, through light coming through the top of the trees, they actually won't grow, they will not grow in such a way that that one tree takes up the light of another tree. They will kind of, if you look at the top of beech foliage, you can actually, you'll see that they don't really touch. They kind of each have their own little spots, right?
They're sharing. They're good sharers.
Exactly. And so, so anyways, it's extremely interesting. So what his argument is basically is that trees can communicate with each other, but the way that they communicate is different than maybe we would think of it ourselves in terms of language like humans do, right? So when we talk about communication, we are talking about it more generally. So broadly here, what communication is the ability to send signals from one organism to another. Now, obviously, humans, when we send signals, we tend to do it by verbal cues or visual cues or other things, but there are all kinds of other ways that we send smells and things to each other that are signals, right? So, for instance, pheromones tell, someone if you're interested in them or not, even though you may not know it. We have things like, the smell of food is enticing to us or not, right? These signals all tell us things about this is something you want to put in your body. This is something you want to be around. This is something you want to do, whatever. Versus
it's
not.
good or bad. It's more of a biological instinct is what they're talking about.
Right. And
I was reading it.
And there are other versions of this too that we may not necessarily think of as being so simple, maybe. So for instance, if you are around a dangerous chemical or something, it will harm you. And so that is in itself also a signal, right? Physical pain is a signal to you to stop doing whatever you're doing, right? All of these things are signals that happen to us.
One would hope, yes.
And we have other signals though too. We also respond to sunlight. We respond to seasonal changes, right? We respond to all kinds of different things. And so in the same way, really, plants communicate where they respond to sunlight, they respond to chemical signals, both through the root systems and through the air. And they, in some ways, seem to communicate by touch, or at least by proximity. Okay. So the argument that's in this book basically is that plant communication occurs through all these different modes. And so even though we may not realize that these plants are all intercommunicating and sharing nutrients and all these different things, then, but it's still communication is occurring.
Yes. And it occurs from the reading I was looking at. It occurs also, what I thought was interesting. So it's above ground with the leaves and, not crowding and making sure that, they seem like they respect one another's space. But then also underground, what grows off of their roots is this underground network of fungi, right? Which is fascinating to me that they're saying that there's these long hair-like roots that join together with other trees. And it's almost this network that has this sort of symbiotic relationship that communicates back and forth about nutrients and about if one of them is has a disease or beetle or something, like some kind of threat that is communicated through this fungal network of types of whatever. And it's mycorrhizal network.
Yes. Yep.
Boom. Nice. So again, it's like this is something that is actually factually based that trees have, that beech trees have. And then I also found another author besides the one you were speaking of, Suzanne Simard.
Yep.
And she's an ecologist. Her take on it is a little bit more, I don't know. I mean, I very much talking about the same overview, but there's this lattice work of fungi buried in the soil that they're communicating through. Hers gets a little bit more anthropomorphized, which I think is where my doubt, where I start to communicate doubt. Just because, again, it's like she's talking about like forest wisdom and mother trees and things that, again, are to me not necessarily what is biologically occurring, and is sort of putting this filter on it that, but really I don't think nature needs necessarily. Like, nature's not, it can be perceived as mystic or perceived as sort of this, otherworldly thing, but it's also science-based. And so I think when you start to get into these subjective, I'm going to say tree huggery phrases, it can be a little like, that's where I'm like, yeah, I don't know. That's problematic. The interesting thing is, though, that trees do recognize, according to her findings, do recognize their offshoots, or what has been almost like, I don't want to say their children, because again, that is anthropomorphizing, but something that is coming from them, that's from their own self.
Well, so
Right.
so this actually comes into a different part of this, which is that so again, the idea of, so trees don't have the kind of cognitive intelligence, let's say, that we have, right? But they are able to send signals to each other. They are able to communicate, and they are able to problem solve in some ways.
Mm-hmm.
And part of that problem solving comes from their ability to, frankly, create clones of themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So, in fact, the largest organism in the world is a aspen tree, and this aspen tree has clones that grow in a colony around it up to 5 miles away. So
sounds somewhat insidious. You don't mind me saying so.
So the biggest
And
one of these,
I will be getting to this point.
phenomenal. Great, another great
That's right.
movie with Marie.
That's right. That's right, dear listener. Coming.
The biggest one of these is called Pondo, which is Latin for spread out, and it's a single clonal colony of a quaking aspen, and it's been found to be, it occupies 106 acres and weighs about 6 million kilograms, or 6.6 short tons. So this root system of this tree, this one tree, has a root system that is 80,000 years old. This is in Fish Lake in Utah. Now, in the Fish Lake National Forest. So the interesting thing about this is that it's a clonal group. So basically what occurs is, again, this tree has roots that go down, and then at a certain point away, where it's far enough away, it'll shoot up another kind of root, like a baby tree almost, that then grows and develops into a leaf-bearing tree. And so you end up with a single tree can grow extremely large depending on how well it competes and how well it takes in nutrients and sunlight and whatever. So that is how it actually communicates with itself, is that it basically is able to, through these shoots, it's able to actually literally be almost a single hive mind. Right? And a hive mind, again, is anthropomorphizing them, as you said, but it is part of a single organism. So
slightly evil sounding.
So it's almost less like a bunch of different clones of a. I mean, it's very similar to, in some ways, at least in my mind, it's similar to how, we start out as cells, whatever, and then we grow.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's very similar to that same idea where this tree network has just been growing this whole time and getting bigger, but it's really part of one organism still. So it's extremely fascinating. And, so so these trees are then able to, obviously these trees are able to communicate, but they actually find that in forests where the trees aren't interconnected like that by literally being, part of the same root system, that trees can still communicate. So for instance, if there is an injured or dying tree or something in a forest colony, other trees can actually shift nutrients to that tree in certain ways, right? Or again, the idea that if one tree is being attacked by insects or something, that tree can then release a sap or a pheromone and a chemical marker that tells other trees, hey, these bugs are coming, release your sap, release your protective chemical, right? And
right, so they can protect themselves.
Yeah, and a very simple version of this sort of idea is the experiment that a lot of people, I'm sure, have already done as kids, which is you face a flower away from the sun, and then over the course of the day, it'll actually move itself to see the sun. Right? The plant itself, well, if it's a live plant anyways, flowers is a bad example, but a live plant will actually move itself to be facing the sun. So it is clear, at least in my mind, that these things do have some kind of response to stimuli. Whether or not we want to call that intelligence is a tricky situation. I mean, let's just think about someone who's in a vegetative state, right? Do we consider that they are, if you're in a vegetative state but you are able to respond to external stimuli. So for instance, if I knock on your foot with or if I knock on your leg or something and you kick, is that enough to be considered intelligent or cognizant?
That you still have some sort of motor reflexes.
Right.
Or
I mean, if we fed you, you would still digest. Is that intelligence? Is that life? Or is that just rote mechanical biology?
Well, I think that's where you come up with this kind of threshold with these two authors. Is it's difficult to assess what is survival, which is again something different than I would say a sentient thinking being in a lot of ways. Yeah,
there seems like there's clearly a difference. Like there should be a middle ground between plants are just stupid matter that have no
broccoli.
Whatever. Yeah, you know what I mean? Like no response to stimulus versus Mother Earth's mind meld or whatever, right?
Yes, superhuman.
Yeah, yeah.
Super intelligent geniuses. Yeah, I think that there is something in between those two.
One really interesting one. So, sorry, go ahead.
No. I'm going to get into my evil plants in just a few minutes.
Oh, sweet. Okay, cool. Actually, I have something good for the end of that as well. One actually really interesting experiment that was done on this was done by Monica Gagliano. And so what she did was she calls herself a plant neurobiologist, which is interesting. They don't have brains. So she is
they have no neuro.
It's like it's like being a wall neurobiologist or a door neurobiologist, but whatever, it's fine.
Whatever gets the grants, man.
It's fine.
Cool.
It's fine.
That's cool. I'm not gonna. I get no beef.
Yeah, she actually did. She did an experiment with mimosa plants. And what she did was basically she had these plants, and then she would drop them from a certain height each day, right? And every time that these plants to kind of stimulate a physical shock, and every time that they had this shock, they would close their leaves. Oh. So they would kind of protect themselves, right? And so that is kind of just rote mechanical whatever, right? But what she did was over time, so she kept doing this over a week, right? And like a week, a month, whatever. When she did this after a large number of these drops, after a while, the plants would stop closing. And so some people said, well, whatever, it's just they don't have enough energy to do this test anymore. Stop shaking your plants. You're some kind of,
beating up on the plants, lady.
This is wild. But what she did then was after a day, a month, whatever, where she didn't drop them at all, so they were just left to survive, they would still not they would still not they would not close up. So, some in some ways seeming to suggest that these plants learned or for some reason remembered this. And again, remembered has all kinds of anthropomorphic connotations to it.
Right.
In some way, their response to this external stimuli became muted over time.
Huh.
That's interesting. Now, the problem with this is, well, can they then be retaught that it's a problem? Right? Like the thing isn't just that, because again, this would be like saying that because every time I don't know, stretch out my silly putty, it gets a little bit less stretchy each time.
Mm-hmm.
That's like me saying, well, this shows that my silly putty is learning and or it remembers, right? That's not the case. It could just be that the mechanism by which the plant opens or closes its roots, its leaves or whatever, did get tired or did stop working or whatever, and so stop doing it.
Yes, you broke it.
Yeah, the
why we can't have nice things.
The real test.
Plants.
The real test of this, in my mind, would be: can you then retrain them to can you train them to close and then reopen and close? You know what I mean? Like
yes, yes. With
so,
different stimuli, will they protect themselves in a different situation?
Right, and then the other part of this that is often brought up about animal intelligence or intelligence generally is: can you train an animal or a plant or something? Can you train another intelligence so that it can then apply what you taught it to a different but similar situation? So it's not good enough to keep rote memorization or rote repetition. What's important is, if I show you that you can cut a carrot with a knife, can you then also go and try to cut a cucumber or whatever, right? Like, that's a silly example, but you know what I'm saying.
Right.
So
but you can extrapolate learning based on a skill set.
Absolutely.
But you can like take that skill and you can apply it to different things.
100%.
That's interesting. Interesting. Well, so my take on this whole thing, if we want to, go down the rabbit hole a little bit on this, is so if a plant can detect danger or a threat, which we're saying that some of these trees or some of these plants can do, right? That they can, if you drop them at a certain point, they kind of retreat and try and protect themselves. Or within the large groves of birch trees, they can communicate about protecting themselves from predators or from disease. So then how can they identify outwards what a threat is? And can they, in turn, externalize and try and neutralize that threat externally? Which would be the makings of a really, really good movie if it was done by anybody else but M. Night Shyamalan. And if you don't know what I'm referring to, I'm talking about it was 2008, 2006, somewhere in the early aughts, The Happening by M. Night Shyamalan. Talks about first of all, it stars a, and I'm using that term loosely, Mark Wahlberg as I want to say a botanist. He's a scientist in it, which is awesome. So right there, you've got like this crazy casting choice, and people around, starting in huge cities, are offing themselves in the most violent ways possible. Like the population, all of a sudden, there's just this wave of gruesome mass suicides, and nobody knows what's causing it, and it's like it's freaking everybody out. And it turns out it's the plants. It's the trees. They are releasing a toxin into the air, an airborne toxin to cause like suicidal tendencies in people, because they have identified that people are a threat and are cutting them down, are like, again, are abusing and are not treating them as sentient beings. And they take it upon their own volition to basically eliminate eliminate the population.
It's an interesting concept. The
Well,
problem
let's
is
not get crazy. It's not terribly, but it's like, it is sort of sorry to interrupt you, but just to finish, it's sort of like the extrapolation, right? Like, if they can do this, if they have this ability, then sort of the possible evolution or next iteration is that they can identify externally, right? And they can try and find their own food. They can move to where sun is. They can reach towards light. They can drive more nutrients out of the soil to become bigger and stronger. And they can eliminate
kill
threats.
humanity.
And they can kill people. Yes.
The thing
That's
I
where
like,
I'm going.
the thing I like
Well,
about
you're
this,
all with the clones. They got a clone army. You see what happens with the clone army. Well, you don't, because you didn't really watch any of the Star Wars prequels, but clone armies, spoiler alert, not good.
not good.
They don't turn out well.
Mm.
No,
The thing
you don't want a clone army.
The thing that I like to think about the plants and the movie is, if the plants were really smart, they never would have agreed to be in that movie. They just say, no, I'm not signing that contract. And that's a zing.
Their agent was like, I'm telling you, he's on fire. He's great.
He's doing.
It's hard to get. I can get you in.
Shyamalan's been.
They're all like, he's on fire. And they're all like, I don't know, you guys. Do we want to? I guess so.
So the interesting thing actually about this, so this kind of brings up two interesting points. The last point that I want to bring is going to be really the thing that flips this whole bad boy around. But
Marky Mark is a scientist.
He actually is a botanist. The interesting thing about all this to me is first off, we kind of, this question of, again, plant ethics, or what rights do plants have.
Mm-hmm.
So it actually came up. There's a society a society for bioethics it was like the European Society for Bioethics or something like that. They met in Sweden at a conference, and they actually decided there that plants do have rights, and one of those rights is not messing with their ability or method of procreation. Because that's kind of like they decided that every species, no matter what sort it has the right to procreate and continue its life cycle. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. Now,
Mm-hmm.
That brings up all kinds of interesting questions, though, for biotechnology, because all of our biotechnology, for the most part, is built on the ability to engineer plants in some way by injecting their DNA to get them to create genetically modified outputs.
Yeah.
Right? Genetically modified.
Monsanto.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I had a friend who worked in this field. She did research for this. And what they were trying to do was actually increase the production of a specific, because this is usually the way this is done, is you find a plant that already produces a drug of interest. So in this case, it was an anti-cancer drug. But this plant produced it in extremely small quantities. By the way, hi, Sydney. It was produced in very, very small quantities. And so
Sydney is still living. The plants have not killed her.
no, she's the master of the plants. So
Good.
So
Benevolent overlord
of the plants. So this, but basically what her work was genetically modifying these plants so that they would produce more of this cancer drug, because currently it's like a very effective cancer drug, but it's like extremely expensive, because you get like, out of like 1 kilogram of leaves, you get like 1 milligram of chemical. Right. So it's like you have to produce a lot of this plant, and it's like a very specific type of rose that like only grows on this one island in like, the Amazon or something. Like, it's really weird. It's very, very hard to get, but
I would see that movie before another M. Night Shyamalan.
oh, absolutely. Now
That would be good.
So in that sense, it's an interesting idea. Like, well, what does plant ethics mean for that? But also this sense of, we actually use plant communication, though, in ways like that, where in this plant, it actually releases this chemical when it gets injured. So it's like when this plant is being eaten by a bug, it will release this drug that basically makes it unpalatable to the bug, and so the bug will go away. Just so happens that those bugs are like ingesting very expensive anti-cancer drug, right? Like these stupid fat caterpillars are like, this is terrible. You know, little do they know, you know, like someone, you know, trying to drink well water and it comes out with crude oil in it. And he's like, this is terrible. Let's move off of this land, you know. But anyways, besides these caterpillar gold miners or oil tycoons, it's extremely interesting to me that we actually use this ability to do this, but we've never considered the ethical, like, you know, the ethical things. And I think part of the reason is that their method of communication is so slow and so much different than our own that we cannot compute it in our own minds. And actually, I think the book that captures this the best is probably Lord of the Rings.
Oh God, here we go.
Right,
yes.
with the Ents.
Yes, yes.
With these, you know,
well, I was gonna. Yes,
they mentioned that, you know, my name, you can call me this, but my real name is so long that it would, you know, you would be dead before it was over, right? This idea of plants live, these trees live for so long and they communicate in these slow, careful ways. I think it's just perfect in that book. Anyways, go ahead, Marie.
No, I was going to say that is the other thing to consider in this is that the life of a tree, like a redwood, right? They're alive for hundreds of years. They live.
I mean, thousands.
For
thousands of years.
Thousands of years a tree can live for. So it makes sense that in some ways during that time, it would have some evolutionary effect towards, like, it would have to have a survival system. These things would be, you know, are self-evident because these things are so huge and have survived for so long. The leap from there to them trying to kill us is a bit of
M. Night Shyamalan.
It's a bit of a stretch. It's a bit of a stretch, but I'm not ruling it out. I'm not gonna, you know.
No, it's not. It's not his best. It's not his best twist.
It's not, insofar as the Shyamalan twist, it's not his best twist.
Not his best.
I will say very quickly, insofar as that movie, just again because I gotta work in some popular culture for this. That movie was actually an allegory, according to some of the when I was reading, because I was like, damn, this Chris has got me researching this crazy ass, trees are alive, and this sounds familiar, and I was like, oh, that's right. And so then I, you know, of course, spent like 3 hours researching M. Night Shyamalan for some godforsaken reason. And it's a allegory. He's from what my understanding is, that he's Christian. And so this is actually more of a biblical allegory wrapped in the idea of the story of the trees.
What?
Which to me, I was like, damn, M. Night, that's a little heavy.
No, it's not. He made a shitty movie about trees, and now he wants to plaster over it.
You know what? I'm not here defending it. I'm just reporting out, right? I agree with you. I do think it was exceptionally bad. But but seriously, he was saying that this is the trees and it's an allegory for sort of the wrath or the fall, and this is what happens. And it's an extremely heavy-handed allegory for us destroying the planet, which I think
like
so
it's
too.
literally like a third, like a, you know, like a third grader. Like, what if the plant started killing us instead?
Us
you know what I mean?
them.
Like, yeah,
somebody doesn't want to eat broccoli. They're like, what if broccoli
seriously
ate us instead?
Like, it's so dumb. It's such a oh goodness. Anyways,
I love it. I love it so much.
The thing, so there is something I think poetic or interesting and kind of terrifying though in the idea that imagine you are a species that lives for, I mean, thousands of years, right? And all of a sudden in your lifetime, in the lifetime of one tree, humans go from seemingly cavemen to chainsaws able to kill thousands, millions of your species in a day, right? If they wanted to. I mean, can you imagine that from our perspective? Imagine if during your lifetime, mosquitoes went from being just a bug, like a nuisance, that kind of sucked off of you and lived off of
something
you and
that could
whatever
wipe us out?
to being able to kill
I'd see
humans
that movie.
on their.
I'd see that movie. That's a good movie. We've come up with 2 excellent movies.
We
Treatments.
have much better than Shyamalan.
Oh man.
Get at us, Hollywood.
Yeah,
But
shout out at us.
you know,
Yeah.
Now here though, Marie, is
Uh-huh.
where shit's gonna get flipped on you.
I bet I can I say 2 words and see if I'm right?
Go ahead.
Red Tide.
No,
Oh.
not right.
Damn, but Red Tide is the flip of this, by the way. Well,
When you said let me give you 2 words, in my mind I was like, can this be turned into 2 words? And I was like really trying hard to think,
Well,
but
before you go into your reveal, really quick, mine was Red Tide, which is a marine event where plants are becoming toxic and are releasing
Yes.
toxins into the water. So it's sort of a very small microcosmic. It's still not a good thing, but it's like, you know, if the happening was airborne, this is algae reproducing and becoming toxic in the water itself, which was,
Yeah.
I guess, one of the other allegories, or one of the other places that they got the idea for the happening. In case you know,
Again,
in case
it seems
anybody
like
else
a
out
lot of
there is-
covering their tracks.
I
A
know,
lot of covering their tracks.
I know. Okay, so now flip it on its head,
Okay.
man. I'm ready. I'm braced. I'm
Okay.
there. Boom.
One of the most I don't know if popular is the right word. One of the more interesting ideas about what happened at Area 51,
Oh God.
okay,
All right, I'm there. I'm there.
is that when this UFO crashed, we were able to procure a number of dead aliens, but also 2 live ones.
Mm.
And they were called EBINs, extraterrestrial biological entities.
Mm-hmm. They were
And
trees.
evidently,
They were trees.
we had,
What?
evidently, we had an extremely difficult time keeping, they died in our captivity because we were not able to help them and we couldn't communicate them and whatever.
We kept forgetting
But
to water them. Is that what you're saying?
But no, seriously, their biology evidently was much more similar to trees than it was to ours. They didn't need to eat. They gained energy of some sort or in some way from radiation. And actually though, so that's part of like the larger UFO mythology, I would say.
Uh-huh.
But it is actually a fascinating and I think elegant solution to a lot of the problems of space travel, right? What if you didn't have to eat food? What if you made food from sunlight, right? You needed liquid, you needed some kind of liquid, but primarily you were self-sustaining, right? That gets rid of a bunch of problems for space travel. Same thing with longevity, right? Your metabolism is so slow that you're able to transport in this way or whatever. And actually it ends up kind of boiling into this idea as well that some of these extraterrestrial beings or whatever are a hive mind. They are all interconnected and clones of each other and whatever. Like it's like I actually think it is I don't know if it's true or not. Obviously, I would hesitate to say that it's not true, or I would not hesitate. I would err on the side of saying it's not true, but it is a fascinating idea. It's like I think it is one of the best turns of the
I like it.
mythology around UFOs in the last 30 years. Like I think it
like it.
is elegant and interesting concept.
Like it. You know what?
At
I'm
the very
down
least.
for it as long as Hollywood keeps its mitts off of it. As long as they don't attach Will Smith to this thing, I think it sounds good. I think it's a good idea.
Good stuff.
Oh
Good
my
stuff.
God.
So ultimately now, so this episode we've kind of touched on some interesting stuff, and actually I thought what would be kind of cool would be, so we're actually starting to finally decode kind of how plants talk through signaling and whatever, and we are using that for our biology, for our like pharmacology and that kind of stuff. But actually, we're also starting finally to get some sense about the way that our cells communicate. We had some sense beforehand, but really this notion of chemical signaling between cells, right? The same kind of signaling that occurs in plants also occurs in us in humans. And it's a part of biology that's actually really important and really, I mean, it's the way that diseases affect your body. It's the way that cancer starts. It's the way that healing occurs. It's the way that growth occurs, right? Like the very fact that we kind of, what's the word? That really this signaling is probably, these chemical signalings are probably the ways that the first communication occurred, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that that kind of simple mechanism of communication is still the primary mode of communication for the vast majority of the organic or biological species on the planet, I think is really interesting. Right? Very few of the species in total have evolved to have sound making capabilities or the ability to even hear sound, right? Very few species ultimately have taken in the ability or gained the ability to sense light with a vision of some sort, right? With sight of some kind. Like touch is one that plants seem to use, but chemical signaling is probably sensibly the first one that we evolved with, right? Back when we were, single-celled organisms, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know. I find it really interesting that it's sort of, it's in some ways kind of one of the most important aspects of how this thing that is life started for all species on the planet Earth. But it's one of those things that we really don't know a lot about.
No, I would agree with that. I think that is the thing that is most interesting. And even like people would talk to their plants, right? Let's say that they do better, but they are, but that is something that anybody with a really good garden, just anecdotally, they're all like, oh, I also talk to them. I also come out and I will just talk the entire time. And to me, it's like, that's a little strange, but at the same time, there is something, and again, this is anthropomorphizing it, but there's something to that you think, okay, well, they are being nurtured in this way as well.
Yeah.
As long as they don't rise up in revolt.
Right. That's our main concern here. So anyways, kill your plants.
No, you
don't kill your plants. Plants are
dirty
great.
Plants.
Damn dirty plants. We were on Earth all along. Anyways, well, that's the episode, dear listeners. Thanks so much for listening.
Yes.
We are going to say the names of our Patreon sponsors and the iTunes reviewers that recently gave us reviews.
We love
Please, if you enjoy the show, please consider supporting us on giving reviews on iTunes in whatever country you're in. We can see them all now, evidently, because we figured out how to do that, which is really cool.
Mm-hmm. Something plants knew how to do all along.
Right. Wonderful. You can support us on Patreon, of course. Just search Mad Scientist Podcast. By supporting the show with any amount of money, you get a sticker, you get a doodle, you get all kinds of other goodies. You get access to video content that we release on YouTube,
which is awesome.
Exclusive to Patreon subscribers. And you just get access to lots of stuff. So if you like the show, if you want us to keep doing it, if you want them to get better, consider supporting the show. And finally, that's it really.
Well, if they want to just give us a shout out, we would love to hear from you. Follow us. Tweet at us. I am at Team Giant Squid.
She is, and I am at Mad Scientist Pod. And we're super active on Twitter. You can also email us. Chris, you can find me. I'm the one that answers the emails, but it's the Mad Scientist Podcast at gmail.com. And if you like the show, check out the website, madscientistpodcast.com. There you can find links to the merch, to any of the news and stuff, to find out about, all the stuff, all the good stuff coming up. So that's it for us.
Crazy good merch. Shout out for the crazy good new merch we have. It's really fun. But
we seriously do.
That I've already spent money on. I love it.
Me too. It's so good.
Yes. All right. So go water your plants and tell them you love them. Just preventative.
It's preventative. Nice. All right. Well, that's the end of the episode proper. Let's get into the Patreon reward stuff.
Woo-hoo!
Okay, cool. So we have two new patrons this month.
Woo!
We have Jennifer Taylor and we have Kayla Nunn.
Oh, Jennifer Galen, thank you.
Thank you so much for supporting the show. We love you very much, and we cannot wait. You guys actually are getting you're getting all your stickers and stuff coming in the mail soon. You guys got lucky because we got the new stickers in, which is really cool.
New stickers.
Super exciting. So we're excited. So we hope you enjoy this stuff. Thank you so much for supporting the show. We also have, Marie, a lot of new iTunes reviews. So we are going to say thank you to everyone who's left us an iTunes review in the last couple of bits of time. So here are the people that did this. So
what is time? Time is relative if you're a tree.
It is. We have Pelcher 314. We have History Laker. We have Pawn Hiki. We have The Living Canvas. We have Antediluvian One.
What?
We have T-Spells and Secrets. And we have Sam Culper. Thank you guys so much for supporting the show. Oh, and Weird Plane. And we have Weird Plane.
Weird what? Dude.
Weird Plane. And then we have let me go to the Canada tab quick, because we got Canada stuff too, which is really cool.
Don't forget the Canucks.
No, I cannot forget the Canucks.
Man, they're doing pretty good with that Justin Trudeau.
Canada.
Chap.
So good, Canada.
So good. Nice
so
choice, Canada.
We have seven ratings in Canada. Okay. So we have Pathetic Cat.
What?
We have Craig Buddy 123. We have O'Doyle R. We have Joel Welch. We have Angelo Fiorentino. And we have Gimme Monsters 1.
Gimme Monsters!
Thank you guys so much for reviewing the show all the way up in Canada. Pretty great. Woo! Can't wait to go there again.
Yes.
Love me some Canada. Good stuff.
We love Canada. We love all of our listeners. Thank you for listening. Thank you for giving us the stars up on the iTunes. We appreciate it greatly.
We really do. And yeah, we actually have one other country. We have
what country?
Australia.
What? They're still alive? You want to talk about, I bet there are plants in Australia that are actively trying to
kill you? Yeah, probably.
They're like, fuck this shit. Fuck the alligators. Fuck the koalas. I'm just going to take them down myself.
So we actually have one review from Australia from Good Nightmares. Thank you so much for reviewing. We love you, Good Nightmares.
Look out for spiders, man. Look out for spiders.
A couple of these ratings are from podcasts you should totally check out. Good Nightmares is a podcast. So is Double Density is a podcast. You can find Hysteria 51 too. I'm trying to think if I'm missing anybody. We've read a lot of reviews just now. Oh, Joel. Joel is great. They have a podcast called the Sci-Fi Pubcast, which is really cool. Mm-hmm. And I was on. It was really fun. Listen to those podcasts. Go listen. Rate the show.
Support
we love
indie
you.
Podcasts. Even
so exciting,
especially if they're in Australia, because man, they're beating off spiders with baseball bats up there, man.
They are tough over there. Anyways, all right, great stuff. Thank you again, dear listeners, so much.
What are we?
We're
gonna be back. When are we back with? What are we doing next time? Anything good?
Next time we'll be back with. Next time we are actually, I don't know yet what we're doing next week.
As long as we survive the week with the plants.
We'll see what happens.
They know we're on to them. I'm just saying.
We're gonna have to see what happens with that one. But anyways, thanks again, dear listeners, so much for listening.
Thank you. Smoking weed, doing coke, drinking beers, rolling fatties, smoking blunts. Who smokes blunts? We smoke the blunts, rolling blunts and smoke them. What? $14, little man, put that shit in my hand. If that money doesn't show, then you owe me. Oh, but Jungle Love. Oh. I think I want to know ya. Yeah. Buy our merch.
Thanks again for listening. This has been the Mad Scientist Podcast, a Damn It Chippy production. Our logo was designed by Carrie Shaheen, website design by Desdemona, and sound design by Jake Cardinal.
Love it. Love it.